that's the big trick and the really, really tricky question right now, because there is out there a deliberate undermining of mainstream media. There are the conspiracy theorists, there are the social media drivers who are trying to do everything they can to keep people in their little filter bubbles, to prevent people from actually agreeing on a common set of facts, the way, the CBC and CTV, when they were our only sources of news, used to and global used to project across the country at least a common understanding of things.
All right, guys. So for today's story, we're going to be talking about that podcast clip from Justin Trudeau, him talking about the media itself, and how biased they are, especially in this story in particular. Now, this story I came across the other day on Global, and it started up like this.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. By a very slim margin, residents of Westlock have voted to ban all non-federal, provincial, or municipal flags on municipal property. Jasmine King is in Westlock this afternoon. Jasmine, what does this mean?
Well, Quinn, as you mentioned, it was a very close vote yesterday. Residents voting in favor of prohibiting those non-governmental flags and painting crosswalks in any other colors than white. This was sparked by a petition brought forward to council in October by residents who say they wanted to keep town council and Westrock neutral after the Pride crosswalk went up in June.
Now, to me, this seems pretty standard. I don't see anything too crazy about having only the Canadian flag, maybe your town's flag and the municipality's flag on those governmental buildings or public areas. Yet the media decided to take this story and spin it as much as they could simply because that crosswalk was painted in the Pride rainbow flag. All the stories were talking about banning Pride crosswalks and flags. And if you look, Breaking Westlock votes to ban the Pride crosswalk, get rid of the rainbow, votes to ban rainbow crosswalks, pride flags, and rainbow crosswalks. It all focused on that when the story was to ban everything outside of the white lines or the crosswalk and those three flags. And when I looked up the bylaw, it says that exactly there. It doesn't specify pride at all or the pride flag at all. It says crosswalks will only be painted in the standard white stripe pattern. Only the national flag of Canada, provincial flag of Alberta, and the town of Westlock flags are raised on flagpoles on public property and facilities. This is already a standard practice that nobody follows, to be clear on. But it says there will be no decorations on the town's crosswalks or displaying flags supporting political, social, or religious movements or commercial entities, and no grandfathering of an existing crosswalk or flag that contravene this bylaw will be authorized. Now, as I mentioned about the flag, in the rules for flying the national flag of Canada, it states the national flag will always be flown on its own flagpole. It is improper to fly the national flag with another flag of any type on the same flagpole. Yet, no matter where you go, especially where I am in Ontario, whether it's from Mississauga to Toronto to Scarborough to Durham, anything like that, outside of schools in particular, regardless if it's public or Catholic, you'll see the Canadian flag with the Pride flag and sometimes even the trans flag. That is not allowed according to this, but it happens every day. So I don't understand what is so crazy when we already have this rule, and it seems like the town folk just want to uphold it and keep a neutrality in regards to these things. Not to mention that Pride crosswalk is a potential hazard, especially if people don't even know it's a crosswalk. They just might think it's a decoration on the ground. But as I mentioned, all the news coverage kept talking about it banning the crosswalk and the Pride flag. And even the mayor apparently was encouraging people, as he admits, to vote no on this and to keep promoting DEI, and that he was very disappointed. And even Randy, the Liberal MP from Alberta, talked about this.
Westlock's Mayor John Kramer made his and council's position clear.
From the beginning, we made it pretty clear to our community as best we could that this was a bad bylaw. 100% of the data says that every level of government, whether it's federal, provincial, municipal, we all use our public infrastructure to promote diversity and inclusion. This bylaw pushes back against that, and so we did our best to encourage our community to vote no, and so again, disappointed that the majority was in yes.
At the personal level, I can tell you what a signal like no political, it has to be politically neutral signage does. It says, if you're different, you're not welcome here. I left Morinville because as a queer kid, I knew I'd never be able to be myself.
Now, I don't know if nobody's told Randy or if he hasn't figured it out yet, but that giant Canadian flag that was hanging behind him is the only flag that tells you that we all belong. Because that flag represents you no matter if you're gay, straight, bisexual, black, white, Asian, whatever the case may be. It indicates that you belong here because you're Canadian. Now, you can have whatever you want on your private property, paint your stairs, your fence, hang as many rainbow flags as you want at home, but you don't get to have your own individual flag hanging up with the Canadian flag or on a flagpole, making you a special group. And this reminds me of the famous Thomas Sowell quote where it says, when people get used to preferential treatment, equal treatment seems like discrimination. And that's what all these guys are crying. Simply because they don't get to have their flag up, they're saying that it's now discriminating against them. When this law, this bylaw, says that no other flags are allowed up there except for those ones. However, this isn't the first time that we've seen the media do this type of thing, because just a few weeks ago when Danielle Smith, again in Alberta, announced her gender policy, a tweet came out from Jonathan Kay saying, CBC News editors having the expected meltdown. This is what the national CBC News page looks like right now. And if you look at it, transgender allies in Calgary and Edmonton protest against Alberta's proposed new policies. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the homepage, 7 stories all about this transgender policy thing. And it's because they know this LGBTQS plus whatever the hell the alphabet is at this point, gets these outrage clicks and outrage stories from people. But as Justin was saying, when CTV and CBC and Global were like well respected. Well, just a few years ago, I remember a website that was called Help Develop Canada, and they talked about newspaper complicity. And they put out this chart, Press Freedoms in Canada. Government owned, CBC, CBC Radio. Government funded, well, the Globe and Mail. Government supported, you have CTV and Global. And then the free press, Rebel News. Now, again, this was from 2020 that this article was written and talking about 2019. So now in the free press, you could put, the True North and a lot of other different publications. Yet this is a little hypocritical of Justin, as his own finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, stood back and watched the reporter from Rebel News get arrested after trying to ask her a question when just 4 years ago she was on a panel talking about defending the media, defending reporters, how they need to ask the hard questions regardless if people like it or not, and they shouldn't be subjugated to violence, imprisonment, etc., etc.
Profoundly shaped my thinking about democracy and about the importance of the brave journalists who helped create democracy in those times. Journalists hold governments accountable, knowing that we will face scrutiny and questions, that we as political leaders are not going to be grading our own work, makes us much better than we would otherwise be, even if we don't always feel that way in the throes of particularly heated press conferences. Transparency builds citizens' faith and confidence in their governments and in democracy. That's why journalists must have the ability to report facts freely and to defend, expose, and advance the truth without fear of retaliation, reprisal, violence, or imprisonment.
Canada's Rebel News is threatening a lawsuit after an altercation between one of its employees and the Deputy Prime Minister's security detail. Here's CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver.
Ms. Freeland, how come
the Deputy Prime Minister was on her way to an event in Richmond Hill, Ontario.
Why is your government supporting Islamonasty?
When Rebel News' David Menzies tried to ask a question, she didn't answer. Then Menzies and an RCMP officer make contact.
You're under arrest for assault.
The RCMP telling Menzies repeatedly he's under arrest for assault. That prompts this prolonged interaction.
How am I under arrest? You bumped into me. You pushed into me. You bumped.
Menzies is then cuffed and put into the back of a police car. He was later released without charge. In a statement, Rebel News says, "We have retained legal counsel and expect to sue the RCMP, York Regional Police, and Freeland as soon as this week for false arrest, false imprisonment, malicious prosecution, and assault." The Deputy Prime Minister's office says they won't comment on matters of Freeland's security, while the RCMP says it's looking into the incident and the actions of all parties.
It was certainly crowding the minister, but certainly not in any way threatening her. And I just thought it was totally unnecessary by the police officer to actually stop and arrest him.
Menzies has been arrested at least 4 times while working for Rebel News, which describes itself as a generally conservative media outlet. In 2019, he was forcibly removed from an Andrew Scheer campaign event. Then again in 2021, following an encounter with Conservative MP Melissa Lantsman.
You are a thug. You are a thug. What are your names?
And in December 2021, there was this incident involving members of the Prime Minister's RCMP detail.
And you can't say that Rebel News is targeting the Liberals because, as they stated in that report, when he did Andrew Scheer, when he did Melissa Lantsman, he also got arrested as well. Because to me, that's what journalism is. You go after what story, is important. And yeah, regardless if it's conservatives or liberals, you need to hold everybody accountable. But again, this is just my opinion. Love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.